Welcome back to another GP Fans testing special. We've gone from Barcelona to Bahrain, and not only a change of track, but a change of reporter with the boots down there on the ground out at the Bahrain International Circuit. Delighted to say joining me to recap day one of testing in a very busy 24 hours or so in the world of Formula One is Mr. Sam Hall of GP Fans. Sam, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad. Absolutely knackered, but you know, it's not bright sunshine anymore, but it has been boiling hot in the desert. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, everybody has just turned on you immediately, I imagine, in the comments section for that one. So appreciating that. I'm glad you're enjoying the weather, even if us back here in Europe aren't bathing in the sunshine like yourself. Let's start with the important 24 hours or so for Haas, because this winter period has been an absolute nightmare for Günther Steiner and the whole of that Haas team with everything that's gone on. But they finally now have an experienced driver to take the helm that was left by Nikita Mazepin's departure. And they're starting to recuperate a bit of testing time as well. Talk to us about that, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, their freight was delayed. 48 hours their freight was delayed. So they weren't on track this morning at all. They missed 4 hours of running. And that's a lot when you've only got 6 4-hour sessions essentially left before you go to that first race. So they are going to be allowed to recoup that time, as a nice little van goes behind me. They are going to be allowed to recoup that time, which I suppose that's good news number one for Haas. It can't be on Sunday. It's got to be after the sessions are finished. So if you hear a car suddenly appear, that's because they're going to be getting their hour in or whatever. I don't think they'll be doing that tonight, though. But yeah, then the other good news story for them is, of course, Kevin Magnussen, a driver who was replaced essentially by Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher. And because the situation Nikita finds himself in and his father in and the world in, unfortunately, Kevin's been the one who, as he called it, he's come home. He's come back home. He enjoyed his time away from F1, but speaking to him earlier, he seems rejuvenated. He's in a really good place at the moment, and if they give him a car that can do something, he's not lost any of his edge. He said it himself. He's still going to be as aggressive as he ever was. So yeah, Mick Schumacher's going to learn a lot off of him. But yeah, he's a feisty driver. I'm glad to have him back personally.
I mean, it's quite interesting. This was touched on the broadcast of the testing session, because we obviously have TV cameras on track, so you've seen probably a lot more than everybody else has anyway, but we've all been able to see plenty of what's gone on day one in Bahrain. And they touched on this, that perhaps Magnussen has probably had the best introduction back into Formula One, because it's so last minute. There's an element a bit of pressure's off, and he hasn't had to deal with this traumatic winter, particularly, of course, if you're part of the Haas team. So he's kind of been really relaxed and nice and comes into the new season just really refreshed.
Well, yeah, for Magnussen, he can't lose, can he? I mean, he comes in, yes, he's got a reputation as an experienced Formula One driver. He joked himself that it's the first time he's been the older driver in a team. It's the first time he's had that role. I think he's quite looking forward to it, actually. But yeah, he can't lose. If he doesn't perform early on, he hasn't had the testing. He hasn't had all the build-up that others have had. If he does hit the ground running, then I'm not saying it's going to catch the eyes of the top teams, but a couple of other midfield teams will go, maybe we shouldn't be looking elsewhere. Maybe we should be looking at Kevin for a future drive. And he's 29, so his comeback is probably his last chance with F1. If he doesn't make it this time, that's probably it. And he even, again, said this himself. He's been really self-referential today. It's great to see. Like I say, glad to have him back, and let's just see what Haas can do. If that car is any good, Kevin's proven he's scored a podium in his maiden F1 race with McLaren, so we know he can do it.
What about the other cars on the grid, and particularly a certain development at Mercedes, Sam, because everybody is looking at the lack of side pods on that W13.
It was rumoured before today, yeah, that Mercedes were going to have this revolutionary new design with disappearing side pods or no side pods, depending on what you want to describe them as the van comes back again. Another cameo appearance. But yeah, Mercedes, it's difficult to read really because they're P9 and P11 today, so not really on the pace. But then again, were they really going for pace, or were they just sort of going for steady runs and just trying these things out? They spent a lot of time on the medium and hard tyres. I can't recall if they did much soft running. I don't think they did. So yeah, I have a sneaky feeling Mercedes is confident enough with this design that they're going, we don't need to set those times. We don't need to steal the headlines for the timesheets yet. Unlike Ferrari, who, again, both cars in the top three. And it seems at this stage you'd be foolish to discount Ferrari from potentially being in the fight for wins. I'm not going to say the C word and go that far yet, but it would be impossible to see Ferrari not in the fight at the moment.
Carlos Sainz would be very grumpy with you for saying that, because he's been trying to downplay Ferrari's chances leading into testing, of course.
He has been, yes.
So, you know, I would want to stay on the right side of Carlos Sainz if I were you. But are we now allowed to start reading into the timesheet? We were told to not bother looking at that really and reading too much into it in Barcelona. Is Bahrain where we can start looking at the seconds and minutes on the clock?
Not really, because if you look at pre-season testing last year, Yuki Tsunoda was in the top two. And we all know how last year went for him. Bahrain was brilliant for him, obviously, because he'd done all this testing there. But the rest of the season didn't really go that way. And AlphaTauri, as good as Pierre Gasly was in the car, and incidentally, Pierre was top of the timesheets today. So have they got something again, or is it again a flash in the pan? We've seen McLaren, we've seen Mercedes, Ferrari, now AlphaTauri, all at the top of the timesheets. It's just impossible to say who is really there. The only team I'm confident in saying that they'll be in the fight is Ferrari, just because they've consistently been there. Although they could have just been going for Banzai, let's get the headlines laps each time. We just don't know.
Yeah, they could be setting themselves up for, right, well, let's dominate testing, because the rest of the season we might not be on camera too much if we're not up at the front. Never know what's going on at this point in the year.
It does happen.
Never know what's going to go on in the next week or so, of course, because we're only a week away from Bahrain. But the final buzzword that I want to get onto, Sam, is porpoising, because we heard a lot of that in Barcelona. We haven't seen that much of it today on track, but it's still there. It's still a problem.
Not so much, but that could just be the characteristics of the track. As I told you before we started, it's quite windy today. I'm sheltering at the moment, but it's quite windy at the track today. So whether that could be helping it, or it might be, I'm not as technically minded as some people, but Ferrari described it as their bouncing problem. They're trying to fix that before they bring any developments. I don't think one track is enough to go, we fixed it. I think when they go back to Spain, or when they go to a lower speed track, I think then it will be, have we fixed this, or did we just mask it? I mean, if we look at Saudi Arabia, that track, the high speeds there, if they start porpoising as they're going into these blind corners with concrete walls, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a car. But but yeah, no, porpoising, it hasn't been as evident today. Some of the drivers in the press session earlier were saying that it's been happening while they're going around corners. So whether they've fixed it in one place and they've moved it to another bit, arguably a more dangerous bit of the track if you're bouncing around a corner, I don't know, but we'll see over the coming days, over the next 2 days, if they truly have fixed it, or if it's just they weren't turning the engines up to 11 today, and that helped.
Sam, you're going to have plenty to get into, of course, as the discussion around the Mercedes side pods continues over the next few days, and everybody's going to be going back to the drawing board if it's deemed legal and be readjusting. Williams are kind of close to that as well, but we really appreciate you taking the time out this evening to have a chat with us under the lights of the Bahrain International Circuit, man. Always a pleasure and never a chore to get your input, and we'll catch up with you in the next 2 days as well.
I'll see you soon. Sounds good.
Remember, you can follow all of Sam's work on gpfans.com, on the live blog, and updates across social media as well at GPFans Global. And we'll, of course, have our review from the next 2 days of testing from Bahrain here on the YouTube channel. So just subscribe down below.